Welcome to Resolve IBS and IBD Naturally. I'm Courtney Cowie, a nutrition therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. If you are struggling with the symptoms of IBS or IBD and want to get to the root cause of your symptoms so you can take back your health through a whole person approach, this podcast is for you. Just a disclaimer that the information I'm presenting in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a qualified practitioner before making any changes to your health or medical regimen. That being said, let's get on with the show. Heather Sunderland, I'm excited to have this conversation with you today about your journey into helping others heal from mold toxicity and other toxic exposures. I was excited when you and I connected because we have some overlap in our health journeys. And maybe it would just be helpful to start with your own story and kind of how you got into the holistic health space.
Sure. My story is a long one, and I've learned how to speak about it in 3 to 5 minutes. But basically, I got sick. I'm 60 now. I got sick when I was 30. I was labeled with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. And as the years went on, I had severe neuropathy, interstitial cystitis. I had trouble walking, trouble standing, even had a spinal cord stimulator implanted because the neuropathy was quite severe, to
Yeah.
say the least. And I also had issues with ligament laxity. Like they thought I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and did tons of prolotherapy and injections to try to strengthen the ligaments. And we were missing the root cause. Had SIBO. The list goes on. There's a list of probably 20 illnesses I had. But it was at the time when I was 52. I had a doctor say, "Hey, let's do a Lyme test." And I lived in Pennsylvania, really didn't think a lot about Lyme, but had ticks on me a lot as a kid and as an adult. Tested for Lyme. I had chronic Lyme disease,
Mhm.
and we treated Lyme. I improved. I started coming off. I was on 20 drugs for pain and all these things, all these
Wow.
labels, asthma, and all these things, and started coming off the drugs, but I was still not well. I was better. I was off medications. I was still struggling to walk, to stand. I still had terrible neuropathy. Moved to Arizona, entered health coaching school, had that terrible ligament laxity, was in a zero gravity chair going to health coaching school. And it
Mm.
was during COVID, my Lyme resurfaced. And I didn't know Lyme could resurface after we had treated holistically. Um, and I also developed Graves' disease, hyperthyroidism, which was not fun
Yeah.
because I didn't sleep for 72 hours at a time. And I had active mono all in the same month. It was like
Uh,
April during that, when COVID had started. And I had to stop health coaching. Um, and another health coach reached out to me and said, "I think you have mold toxicity or SIRS." And I thought, I live in the desert. How can I have mold toxicity? I'm in a new house. But it triggered this thought in my head, oh my gosh, our water heater burst in our finished basement when my son was 2.
Mhm.
And we had 7 inches of water, 8 inches of water in our carpeted, furnished basement. Did we do anything special? No, we just backed it up and had a cleaning company come out and just clean the carpets. I didn't know anything about mold, but I went and had blood work for SIRS. I did a mycotoxin urine test. I did all the things, BCS test. And basically, I had chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which a lot of people say is mold toxicity. They're different. I
Yeah.
mean, most people with mold toxicity can have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, but people with SIRS are sicker and they
Mhm.
take longer to get well.
Yeah.
But but treatment is the same. Ideally, what we're trying to do is the same. Um,
Yeah.
so that started me in the rabbit hole of the mold and SIRS world. And as I shared my story, I started attracting people with clients with mold and SIRS. And so while I was healing, I was coaching people with mold toxicity um, and SIRS. And truly, and Lyme, and I because a Lyme mold was getting missed, and a lot of people who were treating and killing, but they were missing. They were in an environment that was toxic, and it hindered their ability to get well. And it was part of why I think my Lyme and the Graves came about was because I was toxic, not just from mold, but from all the drugs I had been on, right? All the toxicities we're exposed to in our air, in our water, in our food, pathogens, all of it. And I went to a wonderful doctor out here. She's still my doctor, but their approach did not get me well. Um, and it very much just focused on binding mold, mycotoxins, and did not prepare my body for the process. So I sort of walked away and sort of found the approach, found other people who had mold and SARS who were using the regenerative approach that I use with clients. And there are a lot of good doctors out there. Um, and a lot of times they don't have the time even to do all the pieces um,
Sure.
that like a health coach may get into because they're a doctor and they're spending less time with you. So this doctor is still my doctor. She's still brilliant. I still use her when I need her, but I went off on my own and I don't have mold. I don't have Lyme. I don't have SIRS. I'm still peeling away some last layers because I was sick for 28 years and exposed to mold ever since I was 3 years old as a little girl. And
Yeah.
probably every home I had been in, but I have no idea the levels. And I had digestive issues and SIBO, and like the list is so long. But I mean, everything has been reversed. And, what I do with clients is we create that internal environment that we take away the things that are interfering with healing, which can be like where you're living, it can be your drainage pathways, your liver, your lymph, your bowels, your kidneys that need support so that these toxins and pathogens and the die-off can leave. Um, but we create this environment that the body can start doing it on its own. And once that happens, the ball just gets rolling on its own. Um,
Mhm.
and a lot of times when I see people and they're coming from other practitioners, there's a lot of focus on killing or binding, but not
Mhm.
on like how do we eat to detox, how do we eat to nourish the cell. There's no look at like the mitochondria. There's no look at the nervous system and addressing nervous system dysregulation, mindset. I mean, just there's so many aspects to healing, and I really had to embrace all of them. I wish there was like
Yeah.
one magic pill that we could take to get better, but that is not how it works when we have complex chronic conditions. We're like peeling the onion. We're
Yeah.
peeling away the onion, and different layers show up at different times. And it's a process. Nobody likes the fact that it's a process, but it's a process. But I want to give people hope. If I can get better, and have been sick for 28 years, I had a walker, had, a zero gravity chair, I had assistive devices to get around. Couldn't even walk my front door to my bedroom in my new build in Arizona. Um, and now, like, and I couldn't walk barefoot because we have tile. Now I can walk barefoot. I can vacuum. I can mop. I mean, I can hike. It's just sort of crazy. 5 years ago, I could barely stand.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Wow. There's like so much you said there. And in some ways, your story reminds me a little bit of Dr. Terry Walls. I don't know if you're familiar with how she healed herself from MS. And, in a similar way, her big focus in the very beginning was nutrient dense diet, right? And like really looking at food as sort of like the nutrient foundation that's going to give the body what it needs resource wise to help heal. So I agree wholeheartedly, Heather. I feel like my own experience with biotoxin illness, especially with like brick and mortar, functionally trained docs, if you will, right? Often these practitioners have initially worked in the conventional medical system and then crossed over. And although that gives them some advantages, and obviously they have the ability to prescribe, which can be helpful at times, one common theme I found too is like very few of them are deeply trained in therapeutic nutritional approaches, certainly not necessarily behavioral change coaching, like none of that stuff, which, as you're kind of alluding to, are core foundational pieces that should be considered in every chronic illness, right?
yeah, definitely. And I just had a client right before we got on. Um, I mean, I've seen her struggling, and my head is like major nervous system dysfunction. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure there's still exposure, and they've
Sure.
remediated like 3 times. And every time they keep finding more
Yeah.
exposure. And
Yeah.
today I think we pinpointed where the exposure might be coming from, but doctors don't have the time to delve in to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just responding to treating a symptom, but this gal's symptoms are due to nervous system dysregulation and exposure. So it doesn't really matter what we give her if we don't address the exposure and the nervous system dysregulation.
Right.
It's going to hinder the process of healing. And I think once you and we've gone through this process of healing, and even though it may look different, it helps us have eyes to understand and see in our clients what others might miss if they haven't been someone who has walked through mold toxicity, biotoxin illness, SIRS, um, in a way that I think other people can't always
Yeah.
see. If you, and not that I wish it on anybody to go through it, I don't.
Yeah.
But there's a value to having somebody come alongside you who's been on the journey, and who's come through the other side.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And I definitely think that's a piece that often gets either misunderstood or missed is that you really have to take in consideration the constitution of the person in front of you. And like you said, if they're really toxic, whether that's coming from environment, almost always there's a component of that, right? Or historical exposures, but it could also be conditioning and mindset and other things too.
Yeah.
They have to have the energy reserves, the gas in the tank, so to speak, to handle offloading those toxins. And even just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a really undernourished client who was like, desperate to just start getting some wins. And I had to really set expectations and say, look, like, I know you want to dive into detox and have me look at all these supplements you're taking, but we're not going to go there yet. Like, first of all, I rely on my testing to give me clues as to where we need to prioritize. But then, secondly, I'm like, we need to nourish you and build you up a little bit before we start pushing major toxins, or you're going to feel worse and sicker. And that's the hardest part, I think, is just kind of even from the client like interfacing end, right? Heather, is trying to like set those expectations like you said, and that's where like your story becomes so inspiring, because it's like, look, this could be a process. I don't want it to take 20 years for you, but just let's be realistic here too, right?
Yeah. Well, and hopefully a coach, right? Someone with your background or my background, we can help them get to the root a lot quicker.
Yeah,
Sometimes than the practitioners they're working with. Not always,
absolutely.
but a lot of times I just see people where so many pieces are being missed, and the nutrition piece is huge. I could not tolerate um, I just nothing shifted until I started nourishing, and my diet was down to 10 foods. But when I
Yeah,
started doing liquids because I could absorb better,
yeah,
um, that I started to be able to detox using liquids I could detox with.
yeah,
And symptoms started improving within 3 days of the approach I was using, and I wasn't doing herbs and stuff to kill, and I wasn't taking binders. I was
totally,
using food to
totally,
nourish and to
totally.
bind and to alkalize. So just very different. Now, later on, my diet over time was able to shift, and I was able to add in other tools and other supports, but I was so toxic, on
Yeah,
20 drugs for 20 years. To just start giving me a binder to pull out toxins without opening my pathways, without addressing my nervous system, didn't didn't work at all,
right. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
for me. But
yeah,
now, yeah, I can take binders and do all those things, but everybody's so unique,
exactly.
what they need, and even what diet to eat to heal. How I eat is not how all my clients eat. I teach them principles, and at different seasons of healing, my diet shifted, and my body pretty much intuitively told me what I needed based on what I was craving. I craved a lot of cabbage and broccoli the
Oh,
first
wow.
year of healing. And when I look back, I think, oh, my liver needed that
Yeah.
support for detox. And I would eat a head of cabbage like every other day. And when I just look back, and I just tell people, if you're in tune with your body, lean into your cravings if they're healthy cravings, because usually
Right.
it's something your body needs.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even if it's like not so healthy cravings, like chocolate could be one, right? That could be magnesium deficiency potentially. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. One thing I heard you mention that I think would be really helpful for you to touch on, Heather, is the fact that you moved to Arizona and then someone planted in your head the idea that you might have been mold exposed. And so talk a little bit about how it could even be historical water damage building exposure, not so much the current state of the environment you're in. Because I know when I'm trying to explain that concept to whether it's other practitioners or clients, that can be a tough one for people to wrap their heads around.
I think we all have to remember that we're exposed to things all the time that we can't
Mhm.
see or feel, right? In our air, in our water, in our food, even walking down a grocery aisle or a laundry detergent aisle with all those chemicals, like my brain sort of goes, not good. Like I don't have symptoms, but my brain goes, not good. So, I mean, a lot of times we're in school buildings, we may have been in a college dorm room, we may have gone to a friend's house that had water damage and there's no smell, there's no visible sign. Sometimes there is, sometimes you see staining on the walls.
Yeah.
Um, but all of that, especially if you've got poor genetics to be able to detox,
Mhm.
that stuff stays and builds up in our body, can hide in our fat cells. And over time, that toxic load in the body, and not just mold. Part of what I do is make sure that we're looking at the whole load: parasites, viruses, bacteria, heavy metals. Like, because if we just remove mycotoxins from somebody who has mold and SIRS, they're usually not feeling great because we haven't brought down that whole entire toxic bucket.
Yeah.
And so we're getting exposed to those things all the time. Or
Mhm.
we've had childhood viruses that are, in our body. But if we're more toxic, we're more inflamed, we're more acidic, we can have more pain, more symptoms that eventually lead to illness and disease, which may not even have a root as like specifically mold toxicity. Mold will tip a lot of people's buckets, but
Yeah.
there's not just mold and mycotoxins in people's bodies. I live off a golf course. Never thought about it. I bought a house on the golf course. I love the view. Um, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm exposed to pesticides and chemicals. If I go out and walk on, and I'm in the desert, in the low desert in Arizona, outside west of Phoenix and farm country. If I go out and walk on the golf course, like I'm thinking, oh, pesticides, glyphosate, like chemicals. And like I don't have grass in my backyard and I have the golf course right there, but I don't take my shoes off anymore just because um, I don't, but I'm being exposed, right? Whether I realize it or not, I'm being exposed and I can be proactive to do things to help my body, those pathways to be open and help my body do, even though I've got some poor genetics, to be able to remove the toxins that I'm exposed to
Yeah.
um, on a daily basis where you don't have this, I went through this accumulation of toxins and then healing was quite uncomfortable because I was sick and had undiagnosed Lyme for 22 years. So, you know, it was not, it's been a very rewarding journey and I saw shifts like right away, the whole process, but I had symptoms the entire process. And that's not everybody's story. If somebody's young and they're 20 or they're 30 or they're 40, it's not the same as somebody who's 60, who's had this bucket that's overflowing for a while.
Yeah.
But so there's so many things we can do to decrease what's coming in and help open up the faucet so things can sort of drain out. Even if you've got poor genetics, it's really our lifestyle and the things we do
Yeah.
that make a huge difference in how our body's working and functioning. And once we, do the things we need to do to clear those pathways, get bile flowing, get rid of the stagnation in the liver, get the lymph moving, just kidneys flowing properly, um, the body can start to let go on its own. Sometimes we don't even have to. I use binders more to mop up if somebody's detoxing on their own a lot. I'm not using a binder to usually pull out toxins from the tissue. I'm using the binder to mop up because I'm getting the body to do it on its own, to let
Yeah.
go. And then the binders to grab stuff and get it out more quickly so people don't have the symptoms that they're having.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about that because I think that's going to be a very different take than potentially a lot of people listening who have explored healing with a functional doctor who maybe doesn't take this approach, right, Heather? But before we go there, I know you've mentioned SIRS and mold toxicity are two very different things. So I think it would be very helpful for you to kind of talk about that. Maybe just talk about like what is SIRS so people kind of understand that term.
Yeah, it stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and it's called a biotoxin illness. So, biotoxins are living organisms. So, you can have a high load of mold as a living organism,
Mm,
pathogens like parasites, viruses, and bacteria. Um, and Lyme, right, is a bacteria. So, SIRS is very common in the Lyme population that they're
yeah.
undiagnosed with SIRS and they're focused on killing Lyme, but they're not looking at the whole picture. And once you have SIRS, basically the toxic load in the body has overflowed and you have systemic inflammation, a cytokine storm. And it
Mhm.
affects people differently, but it can impact every single system of the body. That some people might come in and like the cardiovascular system's really affected, or somebody's got metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes and they can't lose weight. Where me, I had neuropathy and trouble walking and standing, and I had digestive issues. So my whole family had SIRS, but we all really hit different systems of the body that were affected. And in
Mm,
traditional medicine and conventional medicine, this is like they're not trained in mold toxicity or SIRS, so it both get missed. Many people with mold toxicity, not everybody has SIRS,
mhm.
but the treatment is the same to me for both. But I've just noticed that when people just have mold toxicity and they haven't been exposed a long time, and the people who haven't been exposed as long, they respond quicker. But if
Yeah.
you've got actual SIRS where you do blood work to verify chronic inflammatory response syndrome, it's a 2 to 5 year process to bring like all the numbers back into range. And it depends
Sure.
on the person and what they're doing and how they're doing it. If they have repeat exposures to toxins, not just mold and mycotoxins, that's probably a very common one that we don't know we're exposed to. But I have a family member who has SIRS and um, wasn't due to mold. It was just that traditional conventional medicine put them on one drug after another drug after another drug, very high pathogen load in the
Yeah.
body. I mean, I've had people who were worked in a paint store and were
Yeah.
painters, right? And they're inhaling all those paint fumes.
Mm,
Um, and positive they had SIRS with their symptoms.
yeah.
So it doesn't always come from Lyme and mold, but a lot of times, if people have Lyme, chronic Lyme, or mold toxicity and they're not improving, you might want to look, at SIRS because sometimes people are just way too focused on just the mold and the mycotoxins. And in Lyme, they're way too focused on just
The
the Lyme
Lyme.
bacteria. You really got to look at the whole picture. And nobody who's chronically ill has just one issue. It's usually we've got everybody I work with, I do muscle testing.
Mhm.
Everybody I work with who's sick has elevated levels of heavy metals, parasites, of viruses, of bacteria, of mold, mycotoxins, and toxins. And the breakdown may be different, um, but it's pretty rare that I see someone. I've had one person who had low levels of toxins and they were healthy. They were a practitioner I was connecting with. And then they moved into a house and got really sick and called me. And because I had muscle tested, we could
Mm,
muscle test where they were now, and there was this jump from like two out of 10 to like 8 out of 10 with the whole family. And I'm
yeah.
like, I think we need, and they checked their house and there was water damage.
Yeah.
And that was why everything jumped. Just when we have that toxic overload, there's more acidity, more pathogens survive in acidity. So things can reproduce and thrive. Even if you're not aware, you're in that environment that's not, ideal for your health. So just, I mean, the symptoms overlap with mold and SIRS, and it's just SIRS takes usually longer
Yeah.
to get the nervous system, the immune system, everything back in line and regulated. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It definitely makes sense. And I think kind of at the core of it, there's got to be on some level detoxification inhibition because it's also kind of this problem of all these exposures and then the inability to properly eliminate this stuff once you're getting exposed to it too, right?
Yeah, and I think like so many times most practitioners, I mean, I don't want to name approaches because there's a lot of approaches and I've taught on some of the different approaches, but most approaches go in and start binding if you've got mold and CIRS right away. And
Sure.
most doctors, I haven't met too many, even in the Lyme world that I'm friendly with, there's no preparation of the body.
Yeah.
There's no making sure the nervous system is ready to do this. But if those pathways aren't flowing, you start trying to pull toxins out, the toxins have to move through the lymphatic system and then they get thrown into the kidneys, into the bowels. And if people are having skin issues, it's usually a lot of times the pathways,
Yep.
or the liver. And it doesn't mean people aren't going to have symptoms in the process. But symptoms can be decreased if we've got the right support at the right dose.
Right.
Um, and the more you're letting go of pathogens and toxins, the more support you usually need. And I was the queen of needing really insane support because I think of the length of time I was sick and
Yeah.
and all that was in my body, I needed really high dose support. And so I have people like they're deeply, deeply detoxing or dumping toxins. And I'm like, yeah, one binder pill is not going to cut it. Sometimes people need to take 10, 20, 30. It just depends what their body is doing.
Right.
And I love the muscle testing for that, just to assess, do they need more binder to mop up? Do they need a higher dose of support? And honing in on what support does their body want versus, well, yeah, I've heard milk thistle's good for the liver, but is that what your body wants? My body loves a really high-end liver support that's very expensive, but without it, my liver would really be struggling with all that, has been leaving my body. I need the right support at the right dose on board.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody does. It's just what that looks like for each person is very unique and has to be customized by the person, that you're working with.
I couldn't even go for a walk without planning my bathroom breaks. If you have IBSD or IBD and feel trapped by your gut, you're not alone. I used to plan my life around bathroom breaks until I found a 3-step solution that finally worked. To get my free guide, IBSD and IBD Relief, a 3-step solution to end bowel urgency and loose stool, click the link in the show notes below. Yeah, yeah. I remember reading Dr. Neil Nathan's book Toxic a few years ago when it first came out. And he was, I think, one of the first people I saw who was also a doctor who talked about these really, really toxic people and even not being able to tolerate like more than like an eighth of a like capsule of a binder, right? Which is really profound when you think about it. And so I think you're kind of hitting it, Heather. Like, this is the unfortunate reality is I think a lot of people that are really, really ill, they're in this like sort of conundrum position where they need to get this stuff out, but the normal tools that a lot of practitioners would use to help do that actually could flare them or aggravate them more. Their system's just not ready for it. So that kind of
Right.
segues into just you've been alluding to it, but like without giving away all of your trade secrets, right? Like what is like to you the best way foundationally to try to approach somebody with either SIRS or mold toxicity or even just Lyme disease, just basically someone who's pretty toxic in general?
I mean, I would say number one is you've got to evaluate your environment that you're
Yeah.
currently living in, because if you're living in a home that has mold, mycotoxins, actinos, endotoxins, like
Yeah.
anywhere you can cut down on toxins in your home, which can be cleaning products and those things as well. But if you've got water damage and you don't know about it and the byproducts of water damage, that's where I see people like they're going from doctor to doctor to doctor, and 9 years later, they're still just as sick with all their symptoms. So it's so critical to evaluate the environment, and there's no perfect test to do that either, right?
Mhm.
There's no, like the ERMI test for mold spores, but I mean, I have people they remediate and they repeat with an ERMI, but there's mycotoxins that they're being impacted by. So there's no
Mm,
perfect test. When people aren't getting better, we usually dig deeper into ruling out the environment and checking their body with maybe blood work to make sure there's not signs of exposure
yeah.
through blood work. But that's number one is the environment. Number two, I would say, is the nervous system. Working on the nervous system, most people who are toxic, whether it's from mold or Lyme or other things, there is some level of nervous system dysregulation. These
Hmm.
toxins inflame the brain, they impair the vagal nerve, they impair the limbic system. It can look different in different people. I've gotten pretty good at spotting it in my clients. And there's just so many options, right, for nervous system work. And most people have to do some things at home,
Yeah.
right, for nervous system work. It can be breath work, it could be tapping, it could be somatic exercises that people do at home. And some people have to do a lot more than that to get the nervous system to come back to a place that it feels safe. The
Yeah.
nervous system is dysregulated. People's detox pathways aren't going to work as well, like bowels, people can be more constipated. So it's a piece I didn't realize I was doing nervous system work at the beginning of my journey.
Mm,
Um, and for me, it was the word of God. And I was in biblical counseling when I was so sick. My Lyme was active. I had active Graves and active mono, and I was just being diagnosed with SIRS. But I
mm,
was every time, and I had crazy symptoms at that season, right? I was awake for 72 hours at a time. My heart rate was elevated. I'd wake up with a heart rate of 130 in bed, like I
wow.
hadn't even started moving. So for me, my nervous system, I used God's word. For some people, that is not enough. They
Yeah.
have to do more modalities
Oh, yeah.
to help bring the nervous system back into balance. And if you're in exposure, like the nervous system, the mycotoxins are going to inflame the brain and set off the nervous system and dysregulate it. So those are like the first two biggest, and then number three would be opening up those pathways, right? And having somebody assess, are you pooping daily? Once things start leaving, that lymph gets congested. Um, I'm at the end of the journey where my body's just right. I'm not sick. All the labels are gone, but my body's cleaning out 60 years of, right? It's been cleaning out 60 years of toxins, and we're down at like year 59 or 60. I'm at, but it's been crazy. I've never had so much leaving. If I do not get a lymph massage every week, my legs are like lead. I have to do all these things. It's not just one thing. So everybody's very different. What
Yeah.
they need to make sure in different seasons, what they need is going to change.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so addressing those pathways, the lymph, the liver, the kidneys, and the bowels as being like the major breath is huge too. Skin is
Mm,
huge, but usually the skin is a sign of the other pathways being backed up. Those are like the three things I do before I ever start to detox people
oh,
anymore.
wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
I used to do it differently, but I've learned give people some time to get their body ready. They're going to be a lot less symptomatic and they're not going to hate me, for what
Yeah.
I'm doing. People should not be going in and killing Bartonella and killing Lyme
Mm,
without preparing the body. And I see it all the time. And I talk about it wherever I can all the time. And sadly, I mean, these doctors are very expensive, right?
yeah.
To go to heal, but sometimes you need somebody else to take on that part. And that's where I think like you and I can be huge for the mindset. I want my people to have doctors. I can carry people through the whole healing process, probably without a physician, and refer them to a physician when they need one. But it's good to have a team.
Oh,
It's
for
good
sure.
to have a team, and you need different people on the team at different seasons of the journey. And different people are good at doing different things, and coaches are really good at honing in on the mindset, on the nervous system, addressing the pathways. And somebody who's been through it is going to have a whole different perspective than a doctor who's just treating SIRS,
Mm,
mold, or Lyme and hasn't personally been through it, where we can understand, oh, that's a symptom of detox. That's definitely die off, or you need a little bit more support of your pathways. You need a little bit more binder. Um, But sometimes these symptoms on the healing journey they're weird. They're scary, they're crazy, they're unnerving. They don't, I think when people understand what's going on with their body, it helps them to feel more comfortable, more safe with the process.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. I'm thinking of years ago, I took Allison Seebecker's, like I think her first SIBO Pro course group that of practitioners that went through, and she had this video that I remember watching. And I actually save it for my clients, Heather, because it's like what you can expect on an elemental diet, which is a 2 to 3 week liquid diet, which a lot of people are just not even going to attempt. But I've done it myself personally 3 times over, which kind of gets to your point of like you have to walk in the shoes of what you're going to recommend to your clients, right? And just different colored poops, how, all these random weird things and all of the odd things you would never even think of. And you just your whole little spiel there makes me think about yup, and yup. There's so much weird stuff that can happen when somebody's healing. Like to have that reassurance of somebody who really gets it, it can be so huge for a client, right?
Definitely, definitely. And the other piece that, I mean, nourishing gets missed and how to eat to detox, right? So that's usually the next thing we start on. But I have to listen to people, right? If they're really sensitive to foods, right? We have to lean into what they can focus on.
Yes, yes.
And but I have found this approach of addressing the whole picture, of addressing parasites and bacteria and viruses as well. Um, People truly get well, not just, oh, my toxic bucket went from here to here. Like I have clients in their 70s, their body's just unloading on its own,
Yeah,
gently,
yeah.
and they're just getting better and better and better. But there are symptoms, right? The older we are, the longer you've been sick, it's a little bit more of a roller coaster ride than if somebody's been sick for 3 months exposed to mold. It's a different organism when you've been in mold your whole life.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you kind of touched on this, but it might be helpful just to go through sort of some general symptoms that the detox pathways aren't open. Obviously, you mentioned like pooping every day. What else, Heather?
Yeah. So yeah, you have to be pooping at least once a day. And if you're not, we need to work on your bowels and
Yes.
supporting your gut, supporting bowel movement, motility. Um, Definitely, if you're having skin issues, rashes, breakouts. I mean, it can look different for different people. This was not an issue I had. I had little episodes here or there. My husband was someone as he was healing head to toe rashes. He's just like
Oh,
a skin detox. When he was sick, he had rashes. And as he was healing, it didn't matter how well his pathways were supported. He just would detox through the skin. But that's a sign, that your other organs are often struggling because
yeah,
the skin's our largest organ.
yeah.
If you're having heaviness in your limbs, that's a sign that the lymph's congested. Like if people say, oh, my legs are like cement, they're like lead.
Mm.
That's a sign the lymph's congested. Sometimes pain. At the end of this journey, I've had a lot of pain in my neck. And if I get on the vibration plate, the pain goes away because my lymph is getting really congested up in this area. Even
Mm.
if I do self lymph practices, it's just not enough. So you can have more pain and brain fog when your lymph is congested.
Yeah.
Liver, you can have like belching, nausea,
Mhm.
vomiting. I had a lot of liver and gallbladder issues because of all the stuff my body processed. So if I'm nauseous, it's usually a sign for me that it's my gallbladder or liver. I have dark circles under my eyes and I have makeup on, but I could see them when I got on the camera. I don't know how visible it is to all of you, but without makeup, I have very dark circles under my eyes because my liver's processed so many drugs and so much garbage for so
Mm.
long that once the detox stops, my eyes look great. But when I'm detoxing a lot, all I have to do is look at my eyes or the eyes of my clients. And usually, those dark circles are a sign the gallbladder or liver needs some support. But even just touching the liver, if you touch under your right rib and you press and it's sore, it's tender, your liver
Mhm.
needs some love. If you're
Yeah.
having pain in your kidneys, like people will have low back pain,
Yeah.
that can be the kidneys. I have a lot of clients who have that. It's like all we do is some kidney herbs, and they're usually great within an hour.
Yeah.
But it's finding the right herbs for them.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of reminds me, like my original training as a nutrition therapy practitioner, I was trained in lingual neural testing, which did actually kind of go under the rib cage and assess that soft tissue around the liver to get a sense of, how sore is that? And just in body work terms, right? Like being a body work therapist, like sometimes people don't realize that the musculature and the soft tissue around the organs will actually tighten and feel more constrained and tender to protect that organ when it's inflamed too. So that's a really good thing that you're kind of pointing out, Heather, because it might feel muscular, but beneath that, there could be some organ weakness or inflammation going on for
Yeah,
sure.
that's a really I've experienced a lot of that on the journey.
Yeah.
Just my whole abdomen would get really tight,
Yeah.
and protective when my liver and gallbladder and things were just really having to process a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So yeah, I think those are some excellent things for people to think about just in terms of like, if you're listening and you've had a real hellish struggle with your health and you've never really considered toxicity as a potential root driving cause, like some of these things, if they're hitting home, could be indicators that could be a piece, right?
Definitely. I mean, 95% of all illnesses are environmental. So
Yeah,
I
for
would say
sure.
about 50% of those are definitely mold or mycotoxin water damage related, is
Yeah.
what the research shows when I've talked on the topic. So that's a
Yeah.
lot, our
That's a lot.
environment, our food, our air, our water. So anywhere people are willing, if you're not sick and you want to stay well, that you're willing to make changes to
Yeah.
decrease exposure
Yeah.
of what's coming into your body.
Yep.
It's a great idea to do that. Just start where you're ready to start.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've read the exact same statistic. And even just to like put a little tip out there for folks listening, like to start with clean drinking water, right? Like that simple step, right? Because how much water or liquids just in general are we consuming on a daily basis? And although it might seem like that's a little bit of a reach to get like a reverse osmosis system or something really high quality for your kitchen, man, what an investment in your health. Like right there, you're getting so much out exposure wise, right?
It's so funny because I have a reverse osmosis system and I always have, but I've been on trainings where they talk about distilled water
Yeah.
and I'm in the middle of a course and I'm like, oh my gosh, reverse osmosis water still has 50% less toxins, but distilled water, you're taking all the toxins out and all the minerals out. And then you can put minerals back in the water. And I'm thinking about distilled water because I'm like, my husband's a postman. He works in the desert drinking 2 to 3 gallons of water in the heat outside during the day. And I'm like, I looked at, the water for where we live, and I just thought, if I'm only taking out 50%, and we've done all this work to clean up our body, I'm considering doing just getting rid of our reverse osmosis and doing a distilled water machine. I'm like doing some research on it right now, doing a deeper dive um, because I never realized. I just thought my water was safe with the reverse osmosis, but
Yeah.
it doesn't take everything out. And I've been on several trainings where they've shown statistics, and I'm like, oh, that's not best. That's good, right? It's better. Reverse
Yeah.
osmosis is better. Um, but I'm thinking the distilled water might be better because it removes all toxins.
Yeah,
Um,
so tell me about that, Heather, because I feel like the distilled water had sort of a faddish heyday a few years ago, but maybe there's still a lot of like talk in the functional space about that. But like, what is it about RO that isn't removing all the toxins based on what you've seen in these trainings?
I've been on cell core trainings
Yeah.
and different cell core practitioners who showed research from the EWG about
Okay.
the toxins in reverse osmosis versus tap water versus distilled.
I see.
And the
I see.
distilled didn't have any toxins, and the reverse osmosis was about 50% less. So, I mean, that's still a huge improvement.
Yeah,
I'm just realizing I did a lot of work to get to where I am, that anything I can do, because we drink a lot of water in the desert um,
absolutely.
that I can do to decrease what I'm putting in. I mean, my house I don't clean with chemicals. I don't cook with chemicals. I don't use chemical laundry detergent.
Yeah.
I think I've done all those other things, and I think that's what it's like for our clients. As we have more knowledge and we're ready to take a step, we take a step to reduce, to change out like our skincare or our hair care.
Yep.
We got rid of Wi-Fi in our house. I was in health coaching school. It was a while ago, like maybe 6, 7 years ago. And it wasn't expensive to do. We just had an electrician sort of hardwire where we needed the drops to hook our computers into the internet and our TV. But I saw this huge shift in my sleep. I went from like,
Okay.
and I was sick, when we did this, but I went from sleeping 4 hours a night to 8 hours a night a few days after getting rid of Wi-Fi. And I used to turn off the Wi-Fi at night, so it shocked me.
Yeah.
Um, but that was just something we felt led to do, right? And everybody's at
Yeah.
a different phase. It can be a little overwhelming to look at all the things you can
Yeah.
be doing. I tell people
Totally.
start where you're ready, start where you're motivated to start, and just pick, one thing to decrease that toxic load that's coming. I stopped dyeing my hair
Yep.
soon after I didn't know I was sick and toxic. Now, does everybody do that? No, right?
Right.
Sometimes like, right, you just feel better about yourself. Um, but I didn't know I was toxic, and now it's like, oh yeah, I don't think I can go back, to dying knowing how toxic I was.
Oh
But
yeah.
sometimes we make choices for some things that aren't perfect.
For sure, Heather. Yeah, I know. I'm still young enough. I can get away with the pure henna, so I'm gonna be utilizing that as long as I can. But yeah, when I hit that point, I mean, I'm not going back there either because even the so-called organic, better line dyes, they're still dyes. They still have chemicals in them, and that's so interesting just to hear about the hardwiring of the house because that's something I've been wanting to do since we've built a house, and we even went so far as to paint EMF like base coat on our walls in the main rooms where we spend time. So there's some shielding, but unfortunately, we're still in a Wi-Fi environment. Yes, we turn it off at night, but optimally, I'd like to do what you've done where we get the internet hardwired in. So,
Yeah, at the time, I don't know what it would cost today. I think it cost us $200, and we had
oh wow,
two offices, a bedroom, and our television. So 4 rooms that we had.
that's
Um,
awesome.
so the
Yeah,
only thing, my phone is on Wi-Fi. If I, make a call or something, I can plug it into the internet if I'm doing like, like interviewing people through
yeah,
the phone, not the computer. But that's the only thing
yeah.
that's not hardwired.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
Yeah. It's got to be a little faster, I would imagine, too, because you're not having to rely on the signaling.
I've never had an issue. Well, I take that back. We were teaching our course on mold that my colleague and I did on our first night. I don't know why Zoom kept crashing, and I could not show up on the Zoom, and it wasn't Wi-Fi. It was just technology with Zoom. So I showed up on my phone through to my girlfriend who was co-leading,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I shared my parts, and I couldn't see the slides. I couldn't see any of it, but we had prepared. And it was a little crazy. But normally I have no issues. It was just a Zoom glitch with, yeah, with Wi internet at all. When you're hardwired, it's definitely not an issue.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's just so good to hear your experience because, yeah, that's definitely on kind of my bucket list of things to do as like final steps to get our house to a good place.
And I think that's a good reminder for people watching, like have your list of things that you would like
Yeah.
to do to improve your health, but it doesn't, I had a list and and cross them off as you have the finances, as you have the bandwidth, to go there.
Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
doesn't, you don't have to do it all at once. I spent like 8 or 9 years like using cleaner products and
Yep.
educating myself. Um, I didn't do it in a day. It
Yeah.
was years.
Such a great tip from a health coach. So, Heather, where can people find you? Because you've mentioned a lot of great resources, and I'm sure people are going to be interested in just learning from you and connecting with you.
Yeah, healthcoachingbyheather.com is my website, and healthcoachingbyheather@gmail.com if you want to reach me. And
Yeah.
can I put a plug if anybody wants to watch a video training my colleague and I did on uncovering the hidden signs of mold toxicity and
Yeah.
SIRS, and we sort of educate about mold and mycotoxins and first steps, because our heart is, I don't want people to miss the root cause, and often water damage is an underlying root in these chronic health conditions. So we've taught this webinar to practitioners, we've given it to hundreds of clients. We just did it for the villages in Florida. Somebody
Oh,
found me for their health and wellness group. and we got rave reviews on it. So I always have YouTube recordings that if people are interested, if they email me, I can send them that recording with the PDFs that go with it.
Well, awesome. This has been such a fun conversation. I feel like we could keep talking for another hour because this is an area I love to talk about too. But in the interest of time and just having having other things we have on our schedules, like I think you've given a wealth of information, and this has definitely brought a different and very valued perspective on mold to the podcast because I honestly haven't had this conversation with a practitioner about this particular approach to mold. I resonate with it. I support it 100%. I think this is a very solid way to approach any toxicity, right? And then having your experience as someone who's gone through multiple toxicities, right? Not just mold, but Lyme and all of the things, I think really is unique. And, I have not have someone who's had all of those different toxic buckets full, right, on the podcast before. So I appreciate all of that, Heather.
Thank you, Courtney, for having me. I love giving people hope that they
Yeah,
can get better ultimately, that there's a root cause. I'm sure we both like to do that, that there's a root to your issues and people
absolutely.
can get well. They just have to be willing and ready
Yeah.
to do the work
Yeah,
to get well.
Did you find this episode informative and helpful? I'd love to have you leave me a 5-star rating. Do you have questions about holistic approaches to optimizing gut health that you'd like to ask? Please leave your question or comment below, and I will be sure to address it personally or cover it in a future episode. Be sure to check the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode. See you next time.